Hi, everyone. Welcome, welcome. Welcome. Welcome, everyone, to Cranbrook. Welcome also to all of our guests online who are watching via the DeSalle Auditorium YouTube channel. This is our first public program of 2022, and we very much hope it is the first of many in-person programs for our Free Thursdays series here at the museum. So please do look at our calendar for upcoming Thursday night programming that will be advancing over the course of the summer. Also, thank you for joining us in an auditorium on literally the nicest day in the last 8 months. So I really appreciate that. My name is Lila Catelier, and I'm the curator of public programs here at the museum. I joined this winter, and so I really look forward to meeting all of you and hosting you as we get these series started. I'm very pleased to introduce today this intergenerational discussion of painting in Detroit with two incredible local artists. Allie McGhee has been an important pillar of the Detroit art scene for more than 5 decades. In addition to Banana Moonhorn here at the museum, his work has been recently the subject of solo presentations at the Belle Isle Viewing Room and the University of Michigan, amongst others. He's represented by Harper's Gallery in New York and has received a Lifetime Achievement Award of the Festival of the African American Art and Culture by the Detroit City Council. Mario Moore recently returned from a position as the artist in residence at the Rubenstein Center at Duke University earlier this year. He received his BFA in illustration from the College of Creative Studies in 2009, and his MFA in painting from Yale in 2013. His solo survey enshrined Presence and Preservation was held at the Charles H. Wright Museum of African American History in 2021, and is on view currently until October at the California African American Art Museum. I just realized that I can take this off from the podium. Excuse me for all of that non-visible face. Excuse me. Mario Moore is represented by the David Klein Gallery and has an exhibition coming up this fall there at the gallery. He is also featured in Homebody, an exhibition curated right outside in the DeSalle Gallery, curated by Kat Goffnet. We just found out that the show is going to be featured as a critics pick and art forum, so congratulations to Kat. We are very, very pleased by that. Very, very excited about the attention that show is getting, and we look forward to hosting more exhibitions of this type at the museum in the future. Mario and Allie will be joined by Laura Mott, the chief curator of the Cranbrook Art Museum. She joined the museum in November of 2013, following an active career as a curator and lecturer in both the United States and Europe. Previously, she held various curatorial positions at the University of Gothenburg in Sweden, Gothenburg Kunsthall, the IASPIS in Stockholm, Mission 17 in San Francisco, and the Whitney Museum of American Art in New York. In 2016, she was the recipient of a Warhol Curatorial Fellowship. She has ambitiously curated over 20 exhibitions here at the museum, including such major projects as Nick Cave Here, Landlord Colors on Art, Economy, and Materiality, and the 2 artist retrospectives currently on view at the museum, Allie McGhee, Banana Moonhorn, and Olga de Amaral, To Weave a Rock, both on view through the end of this weekend. So please do head upstairs if you have not seen these exhibitions. Additionally, in 2021, she curated the public installation of the Healing Memorial, which is a participatory project with artist Sonia Clark, co-organized by the City of Detroit, the Detroit River Conservancy. That's on view at the TCF Center, which I think is called the Huntington Forum now. I can't keep up. Can't keep up with the names of these venues, but I encourage you all to visit that now that there is some lovely spring weather. In addition to tonight's discussion, Allie McGhee has curated a studio soundtrack listening experience in the galleries, which will be open until the museum closes at 8 p.m. I hope that you will take the time to have a last look at the wonderful work in Banana Moonhorn while experiencing Allie's selection. Please join me in welcoming Laura, Allie, and Mario.
Thank you so much for coming out this evening. I'm so excited for this conversation. These two like to talk a lot, so you may not even hear me speak so much. But I did want to start the conversation, and we'll just kind of roll with it. We'll do it just like the jazz upstairs and just see what happens and what comes up. But I wanted to start with the origins of an artwork. And part of that is really influenced by the very first thing you see when you go upstairs is a kind of process inspiration wall that we took directly off of the walls of Allie's studio, and then he came and reconfigured it for the installation, because one of the things I think is really fascinating about Allie is his process, his way of thinking, his way of collecting. So I wanted to open that up to the two of you to talk about process, and then even to you, Mario, like what is your process wall, like either physically or metaphorically or mentally? But I'll let Allie start too. Like, let's talk about that process wall.
Okay. Oh yeah, this. Well, you know, it's been going on for a moment, and it usually starts in a sketchbook. I'm still carrying a sketchbook around from Cass Tech. They say like, hey, practice, and so we know about that. And after working in the sketchbook, I usually move to works on paper, usually about 20 by 30 inches. And then from that, go to the canvas, which can be any size. But it's a process of practicing what you do so that when you get to the larger canvases, you sort of like push your way across and experiment as you go. Like, I cannot tell you how many times the direction changes during the painting, because the paint has a suggestive technique that I'm really excited about. When the color hits the surface, that's when it begins. And the pursuit of that goes on for days and weeks until it can survive me coming in the studio and looking at it and not working on it. And people often ask me, oh, how do you know when it's finished? I don't, you know. It's sort of like a process of, I can't find anything else I can do to it. I don't want to clutter it up anymore, things of that nature, because there's been occasions where there has been an exhibition. I'll just use George for an example, and we picked the piece that's going to be on the announcement, and then when they come to pick up the work, oh, where's the piece that was going to be? I said, that's it. oh, yeah. Doesn't look anything like that. No, but that's, you know, you want to be able to, at least I want to be able to make decisions based on how I feel about it now. And so there is no plan that I will not change during the course of the work. And that's about, you know, sums it up in a short way. Mario.
Yeah, so a process wall. I usually, in my studio, I have images of work that I'm really inspired by on the wall. But I think the most important thing I have in my studio is something my dad gave me. It's a little note, and it's from the DIA. And some little kid wrote on there, Mario Moore makes the best art I've ever seen. So I keep that on by this little kid. You know, it's this little child, and I'm like, this is incredible. Yeah. If I can keep doing whatever this kid likes, then, you know, I'm doing my job. So that to me is kind of the wall, but also you know, you were talking about the sketchbook, is one thing that I talk to art students about. It's like, you need to treat that sketchbook like religion. You know, it needs to be with you all the time, if you can. Mm-hmm. And also when you're building on a work or starting a work, right? The idea comes, and then you create something, whatever that little sketch is. But like Allie said, for me, I don't want to finish the thing in the sketch, right? This is just a starting point. And I want the painting or whatever that is to drive change. I'm working on this painting in the studio right now, and it's making me upset because it changed. If I look at it, I'm like, that's not right, you know. And it doesn't matter what reference I have. It's like, how does it feel? And then, you know, the finished question. I always say a painting is never finished. You can work on a painting for the rest of your life if you wanted to, right? You have to release that painting. You got to let it go.
Right. Right.
It's times where you just got to, okay, I think that's what I was trying to do. Exactly. Get away from it. Go do
Right.
something else.
Yeah.
Yeah, Allie's always talking about he works on multiple works at the same time.
Yes, I do. Well, just what Mario was saying, it's like you can't force it. And so to keep from having that combative confrontation with a work, I have 4, 5, 6 of them going at the same time, because sometimes a solution from a particular piece might be applicable to another piece or not. So you have to have, I come to the studio every day. And so I'm going to be there and I'm going to work. And so if not this one, that one, the next one, and so forth and so on, because just sitting there, you're not making any progress. Anytime you work, you gain knowledge. And so that's the process of working on several paintings at the same time. That it's sort of like a Tom and Jerry cartoon with the chicken laying eggs. You lay 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, as many as you possibly can accumulate, because out of that process, you're going to get good work. And it's exciting too, because each day you come into the studio and you pick a painting that you're going to work on, and that process goes on 2 or 3 hours, then you go to another. And at the end of the day, you can have a great day or you can have a horrible day, but you're at work, and that's the result of work. Sometimes it's great and sometimes it's not. One thing I wanted to ask you too, Mario, is like you have tremendous relationship with integrity, you know, on the way that you present the power you give the subject that you work on, which is usually us. And so when I looked at the work, I think about what we were doing in the 60s. And we were not as sophisticated as you were, because it was in the midst of great anger. And so the paintings were like very angry as well. And the artists that were doing those paintings, which, by the way, me and Shirley will be going to, yes, to look at work done from 1945 and to now by artists at that time. Well, we didn't get much exposure. You couldn't even force your way into a gallery. And so it's changed quite a bit. But like when I look at your work, I think that like the integrity that you give your subjects is incredible. You know, we didn't do that. Like we were ready to throw Molotov cocktails and, you know, that kind of approach to the whole idea that like, what the hell is going on, you know, in the city? It's like Marvin Gaye or something, you know, like we were like bewildered and angry. And so when I see your work, I feel very good about how we came through all of that and produced, you know, results of artists like yourself who's capable of controlling that. And it sort of went underground, like, and in your work, the symbolism, you know, is so important. And it's important to me in my work as well. And so this way, you're able to have a slow burn that will last a lifetime instead of just the explosion of anger.
Yeah, and you know, I really appreciate that. Like, I'm like, whoa, this is crazy. Allie thinks I'm amazing. But yeah, I think you know, I think about something. Actually, my wife talks to me about a lot of like something Tupac said, and he talks about, you know, you don't see any angry 30-year-old men, black men, right? Because all your anger and angst is when you're younger, when you're ready to go out there and fight and do all this kind of stuff. And you know, when I look at my younger work, there was a certain kind of I'm just mad, man. I'm mad. But even with that, I've always wanted my figures to have a sense of integrity, And I always wanted, I think more so now, is how the viewer approaches the work with empathy, to think about empathy as a source of kind of this universality, right? Because when I'm talking about the black figure, I'm talking about something that I'm familiar with because that's my existence, that's my life, but I'm also talking about very universal stories, right? So everybody can walk into or come into that with a view of whatever they're looking at with a kind of empathy. Because I think that's the thing when you're dealing with specific subject matter, specifically dealing with the black male body or just black existence in America. I think the best way to kind of discover and talk about those things is with empathy. But one thing you were talking about when it comes to community, I think about me growing up in the 90s and the Detroit art scene, or of course via my mom, and also my mother being an artist, the community of artists and the experience that I had as a child was very giving. It was like all this sharing, all this love. I even remember, and I don't necessarily know if I remember it, but Ibn Pitts, I think he had a long lock, and I was swinging on his lock. So I got in trouble because I was swinging on his lock as a kid. So, but I know that was artist colleague and a friend, and the community that I grew up in, as far as black artists in Detroit, was very supportive of each other, but also at the same time, the white galleries, right? The galleries in the suburbs, it seemed to me, weren't allowing the black artists to show there. So it was, from what I saw as a child and even growing up, it was like we had to create our own spaces. So I wanted to ask you, outside of Gallery 7, when you were doing your thing, what did the space in Detroit look like? Like, what did the art world look like?
No entry, it was sort of like, oh.
People at home want to hear you.
Yeah, it was a no entry kind of thing, and that's why the Gallery 7 came about. I think that there was Cleety Taylor had a gallery, and I don't think of many others that were, and that was black owned, and like in the metropolitan area of Detroit, there were no open doors. And so that's why we formed the Gallery 7. 7 artists got the space on McNichols, opened up a gallery where black artists were welcome. And that lasted about a decade. And then we moved downtown, right around the corner from Gertrude Castle, which was the hot gallery at that time, and New York artists were brought in to that particular scene. And so that as close as we got, as we were down the hall, which was a good thing because it exposed a lot of people to artwork they would have never seen previously. And it was kind of enlightening to the art community that we were doing, the quality of work that we were doing at the Gallery 7, and that it wasn't something that should be excluded, but the doors are still tightly closed. And it sort of was strength-giving in a sense, because it was a continuation of something that we had experienced previously. So it wasn't some kind of surprise or something that we didn't understand or know about. The idea was that you were going to succeed at this regardless of whether the doors were open or closed. And then they begin to creep open a little at a time. Now it's a lot better, but there's still, I think, a difference in the way the galleries look at our work than it is for everyone else, And that's still one of many other bridges that we have to cross. And the thing that I like about your work and my own is that the symbolism is a way of teaching, teaching the community what you know, as included in what you paint, and that's not all. There's more to it, you know, philosophical, science, research. I mean, we just don't go in there and do it. You know, you prepare yourself to do it. And the more this is recognized, I think the better the acceptance will be.
Yeah, I think the research thing is so important, and I figure we can talk about Egypt because
Yeah.
we like to talk about ancient Egypt, and I think what's interesting is when I remember when I took an art history course at CCS, right, and it's a general art history course, so we're going through the history. Ancient Egypt is very brief. Then you get to Western European art. And as I'm in the class, I'm thinking, okay, hopefully I'm gonna learn something new. And then, growing up in my mother's house, she had all these art books. So I had access to a lot of information. I could, read about Kerry James Marshall, or I could see all these other artists that I didn't know anything about. So I thought, when I got into art history, I'm definitely gonna learn about some other black artists I ain't know nothing about. So I'm thinking, I'm like, okay, I know they're gonna talk about Basquiat. I know they might mention somebody else, but let's see what happens. So as we're moving along, Basquiat gets mentioned very briefly in an association with Andy Warhol, right? And we get to the end of the class, and I'm like, okay. Right. So I raise my hand, and I'm like, hey, it's other black artists out there, and if we're talking about art history, why aren't we having this conversation? Well, we just didn't have enough time. And that was the excuse, right? And I'm like, you go through Hudson River and you miss Robert Seldon Duncanson and you miss all these important people. But in thinking about theory and what I'm getting back to is when I'm thinking about art history in general, this idea of making, it seems to me that a lot of conversations are had about the teachings of Western European art because that's what we've been taught in school. But a lot of that information comes from right, in theory and process. And I know you were talking about the Dogon tribe. In grad school, I did these series of paintings that had to do with the Sirius star. Yes. And I think it was the Canis Minor, or the Canis Major, and it was all coming out of the Dogon tribe and all coming out of ancient Egypt. And this idea of the gods giving us knowledge. Yes. So I wanted you to talk a little bit about how ancient Egypt inspires your studio, or some of those ideas kind of coalesce.
Yeah, thank you very much. What happened to me is like the angry paintings that I was speaking of. I got tired of looking in the mirror, seeing this real angry dude every day. And I said, there has to be something else for the basis of my work. So I had my own personal research began, studying art made all around the world by all kinds of people. And what did that teach me by being exposed to that? Everything from sand painting, and you can see it in my work, and tools, like I'm painting with a stick instead of a brush now most times, because this kind of input was represented all over the world, not just European painting. And Egypt in particular, because when I hit that and studied Meta Netra, that here is an example where picture and word come together, and that I could use this symbolism to express, what went on in Africa and what's going on in our studios. And if you know that, you have a much better opportunity of understanding what we're painting about and how it's influenced the world since the beginning of time, and not just since the 15th century or the 12th century. And so this opens up all kinds of tools for us, physically, spiritually, and excuse me, and historically. And so when I saw you and you saw me, we discovered that Yeah, we come from the same planet. We have the same history, and our work is different, but it's the same because the basis of it, like I get excited when I see, the correlation between artists moving in a similar direction, producing very different results, because this is possible, with the knowledge of science, art, and history. And speaking of science, to me, we were talking a little bit today about it. Like the soon as you hit that surface, you're in a scientific, mathematical, philosophical, historic relationship. And so you have to know all these things, express all these things, be aware of all these things all the time that you're in the studio. And I don't think we get credit for that.
Yeah, no, I think it's interesting when people and other artists come into my studio and they see all the, I like to say, you're a scientist in your space or an alchemist, right? Because I got all these different mediums, right? And I'm mixing. They're like, what do you mix with your oils? I'm mixing this. I got a little bit of this, and I make my own mediums. And I think a lot of that actually came from learning from Richard Lewis, who I learned how to paint in oils from. Yeah. And just the idea of experimenting with other tools to get the effect that you want, right? Or the desire is something that I think definitely me and you do, but a lot of artists do, right? Is you don't just, you go to the store and you buy A and B and then you make your thing. It's like, no, I want to figure out what's going to work for me. So I use, a little bit of this, and this is from ancient Western, painting. They've been using this for 600 years, and I use a little bit of this is new material that just came out, and I mix a little bit of that. But yeah, I think it's a place where you're experimenting. When I was at Yale in grad school, I found out that they were making, in this one class, I was learning from some other colleagues of mine, that they were making a special medium that kind of acted like oil ground, right? So you put down, oil ground, and it's almost like you're painting on glass. Yeah. But I wanted something faster, so they were mixing these different things, and I use that medium today, something I learned there. And that was something I also learned to explore was how do you use all these tools that are available, and you got to build a painting from the ground up. It's not just the paint, right? It's like the surface, the structure, what's going to be on that bottom layer, what's going to go on top of that, and what are you going to do after that? So it's like this whole kind of multi-layered, almost like baking a cake when you really think about it, right?
A little cooking going on.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's like me. I use enamel and acrylic and on the same surface. I couldn't wait to do that because when you're in college, it's, oh, no, you can't mix these two things together. I said, the hell I can't, And once I didn't have them telling me what I could not do, I'm going to get real progress because what happens, the alchemy, when you mix these oil and water, hey, shabam. It brings something, a whole new way of looking at, speed, light, and color, because these things are interactive. And it's something that I love to do, and you see it in all my work, I remember at an opening, a young man asked me, he's like, man, I love how you make all those little bitty dots. I said, man, I don't make all those little bitty dots, The paint makes those little bitty dots, And so knowing your materials and experimenting with them is what brings you a new way of expression, a new exciting surface, and an excitement that will get you up the next day to come to the studio and see the results.
Yep. One thing I read the catalog and I was reading about I think that it's the piece that the DIA owns, or one of the pieces the DIA owns. But it was talking about how you created that piece after having a dream. Because I have a relationship with that, but I wanted you to talk about how that painting came about.
Yeah, well, like again in your work, I see that as well. Is that like the dream is part of the work, because if you were working like we have, say, all your life on creating, art, you are going to be living it day and night. And so when you sleep, you paint, you dream, and there's no difference. And so when you wake up, you're still, working, thinking, dreaming. And so I think dream is a very large part of our psyche for all of us, whether you're an artist or not. And so that process, when you get up, like Descartes says, when do you know you're dreaming or awake? What defines the difference? And there is no difference. So for me, I'm thinking when I'm working on the painting, I'm in that painting. And that's much like a dream, because you know damn well you can't do that, but you can feel that way about your work. You're that involved in it.
Yeah, I remember I actually had a dream about painting. And I woke up and I couldn't believe it. I was like, oh, this is crazy. I must be doing this all the time to be having a dream about it. Because
they're easier when you dream about it.
Exactly, but it was really amazing. It was during grad school, and that's, because they kick you in the butt, kick your ass as you. But I couldn't believe it, and I was like, I need to go to a bar or something, and because sometimes I want like a mental break, right? Yeah. But another situation was, and before this time that never happened to me. So I had it not like Martin Luther King, but I had a dream, and and I woke up from the dream and I immediately did a sketch because I felt like whatever that was, I needed to jot that down, right? And then I went through this whole experience where I had brain surgery and all that stuff. So I go back and I look at my sketchbook, and I go to look in the sketchbook, and the sketch that I did was of surgeons standing over a guy, right? And it looked like brain surgery. Yeah. So I was like, oh, I gotta, and I even wrote notes in the sketch that I did from this dream. And I was like, I really need to make a painting of this thing, because it was something that was, I won't say out of body, but it was like something was telling me to do this thing, and it seemed like from reading about that painting that was a similar experience, that this dream was telling you need to make this thing,
Exactly. And like I think the one you're speaking of is called Night Visitor, and which is, I wish I could dream this. It's a painting called Night Visitor, which was almost, illustrated in my dream, because when we're doing all that research on African dance and mask, the dream becomes alive at night. That's the world you're in. And so when I was working on a current painting, this night visitor image was so powerful to me that it was a reality, and the end result became a painting.
Another thing that I wanted to talk to you about was the circle, right? Because I feel like it's this very old universal symbol, and it's something that's endless. There's repetition in it. And I've actually, like the piece that I'm getting ready to work on of you is my first Tondo painting, circular painting that I've done. And I've been thinking more about sacred geometry, or the organization of compositions and how you align things. But I know the circle comes up and up more and more in your work often. And I wanted to just ask you, how did that come about? Like, how did you come to that point, or how did it find your way? How did it find its way into your work?
Yeah, I think the first or the earliest occurrence of it was doing research, like we speak of frequently, is that when I was doing a research that excluded me, like we both went to CAS, right? Hey,
CT.
Yeah. Well,
number 1 second to none, y'all.
Right. The art history class there was like incredible. I spent a whole year studying art history. But like you said, when we went through Egypt, it was like so damn fast, you know, you don't even remember it. But everything else, you stayed there a whole year. And cave painting, to me, is undescribably beautiful. You know, it is up to date now as it was when it was done, and I think it will forever be. And so when I was doing research to say, well, I'm going to go back and find out all the kinds of people at different periods of time that created art, and of course that includes everyone. And the circle was a large and reoccurring thing in the ancient cave paintings. And the half circle, or the banana moon, came from that particular association. And the part about going beyond, like the Dogon and in the future, and space exploration, and the studying of the orbit of all planets, it's not really circular, it's more elliptical, because they move further and further apart as the years go by, or millennium goes by. And so I started to experiment with that in my work. And it had a symbol explanation that it's infinity and it's reoccurring. And all these things were well suited, you know, for what we do. Like I could apply this to the work. And so it's a theme that I return to time and time again. Even the action, like we talk about physical action when you're working, it's the motion too that is important. And like in the work, the application of paint is determined by speed. And you can tell when I'm going fast, and you can tell when I'm going slow. So the scientific input on reading a painting is an important thing that I want to convey, and I think that everyone understands when they see it. And so the circle became a companion for me, and the ellipse in particular, because of the motion, and it represents our universe as described by the Dogon, and it's an ancient relationship that I don't think that we will ever surpass. And so I'm always working with that form, and sometimes it's the beginning, because it's the beginning is the motion, the action, you know, the occurrence of this once again, we begin with the same kinds of illustrations, experiences that we have had all our lives as the human being and living on this particular planet, and the association with all the others. So it's a powerful thing. And as we see here, you know, I got this, someone sent me that on the internet, man, I was knocked out, you know. I said, like, Mario. Yeah, it's beautiful, you know.
Well, I started the painting, so, you know, you'll be able to see it and come out of the studio and you see the painting, you know.
Yeah, cool.
Your head is huge, that's what I'm gonna say.
That's not,
big.
you don't mean that in a way, do you?
No, the painting, you know, you in the painting. I did want to talk about, I think, your largest painting in the show, and you know, you talked about your the space that you're in. Did you do that painting in sections, like were they separated or were they together at one point? Because I think what's amazing about that painting, I was looking at the blues and the yellow in the painting, right? And it's interesting because I teach sometimes. I talk to art students. I talk to them about composition and, you know, how you need to navigate the eye. And the blue, it almost takes you in an ellipse. The blue goes from like the left all the way around and comes back around.
Yes.
And that, because it's a really hard thing to do a long painting. You know, just the composition of that. You know, I recently did a painting that was like 17 feet. It was a long painting. You know, I had to figure out what was going to happen in the middle of that space.
Exactly.
And it was taking me a while to figure it out, you know. So I wanted to talk about, you know, how you put it together in the studio.
Yeah, man, it was all kinds of ways, you know, like, in fact, at one point in time, I had to have Nick
Oh, okay.
build me a bridge
Oh,
so
wow.
that I could slide it along the painting to reach the middle, because it became an area that was weak, because I couldn't physically, you know, do what I do normally in this particular area. So Nick built this bridge, which I would slide along the painting like a slide rule, and I would get on the bridge and paint the middle areas. Then I would put it on the wall and work on it as well. And it's two 12-foot pieces. So
Yeah, it's
that's
huge.
a lot of space, man. And like you said, compositionally, something that rectangular is difficult to handle. It's like having a giant white shark in your studio. You have to deal with this animal. And it was exactly as you said, you know. It was long, it was hard to handle. There were areas that are difficult, and you could tell, like, what's going on here? You know, this is too weak. You know, I don't have the impactment. I don't have the variety of ways of approaching it. But it was really exciting. So, like, now I want to do one larger than that, you know.
Exactly.
And the other thing is that, you know, there were two different pieces, and information from one piece to another is difficult to carry over, because, like, you're accustomed to, okay, I'm working on this painting, and it's 12 feet. But there's another one that's 12 feet, but it can't be another painting. It has to be the same painting. And so, like, that, you know, was very difficult, you know, for me to do. But like I said, it was very exciting, and I loved it. You know? And I think we like that, you know, like, the bigger the challenge, the more exciting it is. And you want to come out on top of it like Muhammad Ali, you know?
Exactly. Yeah, you know, I like, one thing I like about Basquiat and things that he said is, like, kind of considering the art world in the boxing ring sensibility, you know. It's like, yeah, I'm about to go in
Knock
here. I'm
this
about,
cat out.
I'm about to tear it up, you know.
Right.
But I think, you know, that's something that I think great artists do, is, like, you want to challenge yourself in whatever the next thing is, right? It's like, I'm gonna pick something that I know is gonna be difficult, but it's so exciting because I get to challenge myself and see how far I can go.
That's what I wanted to ask and tell you, too. Like, you pick on the biggest bully in the class, like, because, like, this guy paints on copper and uses silver point. It's like, hey, you're talking about fooling around with the Frankenstein monster, you know, because it's very difficult for you to pull that off. And I remember, you know, like you mentioned, it's akin to pen and ink, which it is, which, like, hey, there's no room for mistakes, you know, like, every stroke has to be the stroke, because you can't erase and you can't cover it up.
Exactly.
You can't do any of those things that we rely on in everyday life to correct a wrong left-hand turn or something. No, it's not happening. They're going to tell everything.
You're gonna be able to see all those
That's right.
mistakes.
Yes,
Every
exactly.
single one of them. And I think that's the thing I love about painting, is, like, you can cover up anything and everything. And I chose these materials because I knew they were going to be difficult, and I felt like they were going to deliver specifically what I was talking about, which at once was about the intrinsic value and the materiality of the thing, right? And I'm talking about black people, I'm talking about black men, I'm talking about black women, and using these materials is going to add intrinsic value, right? Silver has a value, copper has a value to these subject matters. But also, when I would go to museums, I would often look at, 17th century Dutch painting.
Yes.
And I would look at,
Dürer.
some of Peter Paul, Dürer and Peter Paul Rubens' paintings. And if you look at these paintings throughout the museum and you see the smaller ones, a lot of them are not on panel. A lot of them are on copper, you know, and there's certain radiance that you get, and it was like, that light is just so beautiful.
Yeah.
And I wanted to know how to do that. What do I do to paint on it? So I was a part of this. Actually, I kind of snuck on a trip because I wasn't in the class, but it was a class that was going to the Met at Yale, and I was like, okay, I'm coming too. So, they walking through the galleries, and the professor is talking about this young Peter Paul Rubens painting, and it's a painting called Young Scholar, and it's on copper. And he just mentioned, you can paint on this the same way you paint on canvas. You prepare the ground and all that kind of stuff. But he was like, you can also just paint right on the surface. And he was like, you just need to clean it like you were doing in the etching studio. You just got to degrease the plate. I was like, oh my gosh, I'm about to, and I was just rereading W.E.B. Du Bois' Souls of Black Folk. So it was in alignment with my thought process about the veil, about the double consciousness of being black in America. And then I also had a similar situation with Silver Point. With Silver Point, I would see all of these drawings in museums, and I would read Silver Point, and I had no idea what that meant whatsoever. But I wanted to find out because I love the value, right? Because you can only get so dark with whatever you're drawing. You're going to stay consistently that light value. And all the Silver Point drawings were like this big. They were all big. So I was like, if I'm going to go to this material, I'm going to make the largest Silver Point drawings I can possibly think of, And both of those materials are really unforgiving.
Yes.
And I think it was important for what I was making and the people that I was painting to use a material that was unforgiving. Yeah.
Yeah, bravo.
Thank you.
So I don't really want to stop this conversation. I told you I wasn't going to say anything. Well, we would love to open up for questions from the audience. How many, what are we doing on time? 3 or 4 questions? All right. I see hands up.
Thank you. Mr. McGhee, you were saying something about something you were going to do with Shirley, and I didn't hear that. Can you elaborate on that?
Oh, well.
Shirley Woodson, right?
Yes. Yeah, we're going to do a panel on a book which was published about Harold Neal. And this is a documentation that I love because this cat was like, at one time my studios were like 20 yards apart. And Harold, like so many others, he never got the look he deserved. And so this book, it will give us the documentation on his work and his life and the artists that were working at that time, including myself. And it goes from 1945 to now. And you see some of the artists like Dowdell and Leroy Foster, and all these cats were like working at a time where you got no look, and you were looked at as somebody who was a neighborhood cartoonist rather than an artist. And so I had mentioned that because if you see this, buy it. It's a great introduction to what was going on in the 60s and in the Detroit area. Like, Detroit has a very rich history in the arts, but we're not given much recognition on that history. Everything is about New York, and like what are we? We've been here a long time, and these are just a few of the artists, maybe 10 or 12, then Ibn as well, and the kinds of things that were going on, subject matter, were just like I would say, we were like want to throw a brick through your window because the anger is so heavy, and you see in these paintings that you realize how these artists felt about the plight of so-called black art in the city of Detroit. And that reminds me of another little short story about, in the 60s, there was Sam Hunter, who's a writer of books and articles on art. The galleries in Detroit brought him here to look at work and compile a show. And I think it was at Cranbrook, as a matter of fact, that particular show. It was about Detroit. And he went around to all the galleries in the city, and I think Gertrude Castle brought him in. And they were disappointed because what Sam Hunter said was that the only unique investigation of art in the city of Detroit was at the Gallery 7. Because these guys were like ferocious and painted whatever and however they felt. And he condemned all the rest of the galleries as being derivative of New York. And so this position that we found ourselves in during that period is not a new one and is well documented. And in this book, you will see all of these works by these artists who are very emotional. And it's a good thing to have that documentation, because if not for that, and it's something that we never got a lot of or did a lot of for ourselves or others did, is document what you do while you're here. Yep. And you won't be here forever. And the bad thing about it was when we go, there's nothing but dust, because no one documented, no one took it seriously. And so it gets washed away, with your death. And something that has added to the lack of respect that our work is getting.
Thank you, gentlemen. My name is James. I want to ask both of you, but I think Miriam more poignantly, how do you see technology emerging with your art going in the future, and you too, Mr. McGhee, if you consider it? Thank you.
I feel like for young artists, of course includes myself, technology is important, because it allows you to get a broader audience. I mean, I think the drastic change in the last 15 years from before is that now you can kind of talk directly through your work to people in other countries, other cities, other nations, which is very different from what it was before, and you can make an income off of that. So I think that's really important for a lot of younger artists. I think the question that I keep getting from college students is when I'm gonna make an NFT.
Yes.
And I'm like, more power to the NFTs, more power to the artists that are making the NFTs. No hate on them. Mm-hmm. I went to CCS for illustration, right? And that's what I got my degree in. And a lot of the NFTs that are coming out, a lot of things that are making, we were making in class. We never would have thought like, oh yeah, you can make that assignment and then just throw it up as an NFT. It would have been like insane, but that's what's happening now. And I think for me, what's limiting with that is that a lot of money that's being made off of that and people that are making it are mainly celebrities, right? So the serious artists are jumping on board, but for me to get involved with that, I feel like there needs to be something else, right? It has to benefit something. The piece can't just be something that I made and we're gonna make a copy and make it a NFT chain or something like that. It's got to be very specific for me to move forward to decide to do something with that. Yeah.
I asked Sanger to be my plant just in case there wasn't engagement, but y'all have questions, so I'll give it to Sanger and then we'll take a couple more.
Thank you. I came through on my assignment. So my mom and I had a conversation last weekend, and we talked about how, seeing that we have such a rich painting tradition in the city, and we've had for years now, I'd like to know more about, like, what do you think about, like, some of the common threads or kind of the evolution of how painting has evolved in Detroit, in the metropolitan Detroit area over the years, from from the angry paintings up till now. Yeah, right, up to the NFTs, right?
Yeah, yeah. Well, yeah, you know, Shirley and I are both in the same age group, and during that time, you know, the documentation of everything that has occurred, like we're sort of like some of the last, you know, relics to be here to give you that information because we experienced it and not because we read about it or heard about it or something of that nature. And like this panel, I think, is in Saginaw, and like it was at Eastern Michigan, and it was at Wayne State, and this sort of like road show idea of presenting, you know, historic references of black artists is an important component, you know, of our history. And I think that it's something that we should continue doing, you know, exposing people to, even though these artists work for 40, 50 years and past, that their work should be resurrected so that we can, you know, see the basis of the history of our work, and how it has affected those of us who came later. And it's a very rich and inspiring, you know, thing for us to be able to discover, and for everyone, you know. I don't know if I hit that or not. You know?
Good afternoon or good evening. Can you tell me, Mr. McGhee, whether you feel that there was a significant influence by the Russian artists that were conducting the, I think it was the Society of Arts and Craft, I think Pen and Pal, what the significance in terms of their influence on the artists that you talked about that end up at the Gallery 7. And I'm talking about, I've been looking at Harold Neal's and the other artists, the background that they put into their work and how the images flow out of that work. And then I said, okay, let me go on down this rabbit hole, and I started looking at the Russian art school in terms of what they were doing. And I saw some similarities. Is that what you see, or is that just something that just grew out of the moment and the times that people were starting their work?
Well, yeah, well, you know, that's just like the world of view of art is open to all of us. And I think that a good artist looks for work done by artists all over the world. And that the Russian influence, the German influence, it doesn't matter what your ethnic background is. It's that everyone who is an artist is a contributor. And that's what we need to look for when we want to find out about the universality of art, is that everyone can participate, you know, and everyone should, because it's like if you're a great chef, you know that the ingredients are very important. The variety of ingredients is what makes it a great meal, is what you can pick from Italian, French, Russian, or whatever your background might be. Bring it, and we will find a way to use it.
We'll take a final question, and then I'll invite everyone to join us in the gallery for a listening experience with Allie's soundtrack. Okay.
Good music.
Thank you. I wanted to ask Mario a question. How much autobiography is there in the work?
Oh man, you know, I feel like even the artists who deny or try to deny their autobiography in the work, it's impossible. It's impossible. I don't care what kind of work that you make, you know. I don't care if you're attached to minimalism and try to withdraw the hand. I don't care if you're using machines. You know, I think the artist's autobiography or the artists themselves are in the work, you know, always. You know, and I think even to the point when you're trying to remove yourself, right? And you're allowing, the paint to do what paint does, or whatever material that you're using, the conversation is happening through you, right? And even with that, you are one of the tools. So you will always be a part of that conversation. And, I think for me specifically, there are things that are very specific that are like, okay, this is definitely about my relationship to, this, or this is my relationship to police, or this is my relationship to growing up, or, in that relationship, or how I like to talk in the way that James Baldwin talks is, that's my child, that's my wife, that's my husband, right? So it's like in that relationship, it's still through you, right? He's talking about a group of people that he's included in, right? But the conversation is always through him. So yeah, I think my work naturally is going to be autobiographical.
Well, I actually wanted to take a moment to talk a little about the amazing connections that came up between the two of your work throughout this conversation. To talk about ancestral connections, that being like so much at the root of what you do, but also even though that Mario works representationally primarily and Allie's with abstraction, this idea of the dream space, the tweaking of reality, I thought that was a really rich part of the conversation. And I think in terms of art history, I think this conversation to me between these two generations of Detroit is gonna be a really important part of art history. So I wanna thank you so much for your time. Why don't you hold this up like a nice model here? And also, we made a book. The book is available upstairs. It has essays for myself and also Taylor Aldridge, who is my frequent collaborator and co-curator, and also the curator of Mario's exhibition at the African American Museum in California, the California African American Museum in LA. So I encourage you all to get a copy of this book and make sure that it all lives on. Read it, pass it on, have other people read it, have other people buy it. So let's go upstairs, listen to some music, and we're also here to answer questions. Thank you so much.